3 years ago, I switched to a MacBook. But this wasn't the first laptop that I bought, and I even wanted the other one more. But being a high-performance Intel and Nvidia laptop, it came with some crippling compromises. The power was there, but the noise that came out of this machine was just next-level jet engine, and the battery life completely sucked, like most other Windows laptops, including self-draining in its sleep, like a crack addict going through withdrawals. Essentially, I pretty much bought a less powerful desktop with a screen attached to it. Then this came out, the M1 MacBook Pro, a revolutionary laptop with high performance, near silent operation and battery life to match, even if it is still a heavy beast. But how did Apple do what Intel and Nvidia couldn't? Why doesn't it suffer from the same issues that made me sell the first one? Well, the answer is simple. Nearly all of the benefits of Apple laptops since 2021 has been the result of them taking on a huge risk on an entirely different architecture. And it paid off. Apple laptop sales have been increasing since the release of the M series chips, while Microsoft-based laptop market share has been diminishing. But the thing that this graph also illustrates is the obscene amount of money lost by Microsoft and their partners, going directly to their biggest competitor. But this is where the story changes for Apple, and where my story continues after 3 years of waiting. Let me explain. Are you tired of overpaying for your favorite games and essential software? Then you need to check out whokeys.com. In fact, let me show you the benefits and how you could save. There's over 100 games for you to browse for cheap. You can save every month on your Office subscription, even fixing the Windows watermark, ruining your game capture and limiting your Windows customization. So let's get a Windows key. I especially like that you can use PayPal for easy, secure checkout, and using coupon code TL25 gets you 25% off these already low prices. All you need to do is paste your key to become fully activated. And TechLens subscribers like the fast key delivery and peace of mind that I use the service personally. So what are you waiting for? Start saving money and visit the WhoKey sponsor link below. Luna, hey, you're cute. The reason Apple should be scared is because Windows laptops are finally getting competitive in terms of efficiency and relative performance, which is the exact reason why recent Macs have become so popular, especially with non-Apple users. And what's worse is this attack is coming from two different directions for Apple. Not only is Intel actively coming out with their Lunar Lake thin and light laptops, which look to have somewhat weaker CPUs, but still enough for most tasks, and a GPU that is actually very impressive. But early reports, they look like they still unfortunately suffer from that dreaded battery drain issue. And a portable device that slowly dies when you're not using it makes it a non-portable device when you next go to use it, and a very poor experience. I honestly cannot stress how much of a high impact issue this is, especially if this is one of your secondary devices. Having your battery drop by about 20% or more while you sleep is something most Windows laptops are still plagued with to this day, and one of the biggest reasons why I switched to Mac. But the Windows devices that fix all of those problems, the ones that are far more exciting and impactful in my opinion, had the roughest start and the worst first impression I have seen in a long time. Each and every one of these laptops in front of me is based on the same underlying ARM architecture, including the MacBook. And the reasons I swapped to Mac are now the things that Microsoft are trying to pull me back with. Yes, they were overhyped at launch. And no, the AI features, they really don't matter. They're not really a selling point for most people. And both of these things led to some pretty messy damage control at launch. But does that matter? Because you get every reason Macs have been great, but now running Windows, which sounds like it would be an amazing option, or at least worthy enough for me to buy 4 of these laptops and use them over the last 2 months, using the same processor technology Apple adopted in 2021, even though Microsoft has technically been developing ARM devices for far longer. But the difference with these new Windows on ARM laptops is that this is arguably the first generation where they're taking performance and compatibility seriously. And on the surface, these new laptops should be terrifying Apple. But we know that there's so much more to a laptop than benchmarks alone. And now that it's been a few months since launch, how are these in terms of compatibility? Because if everything goes well today, I will swap to one of these laptops. The only question is, which one? But more importantly, is Windows on ARM ready? Let's take a look. I want to jump into performance, but we have a bit of a mixed bag of devices here that should answer some interesting questions about specs and performance scaling. So let's quickly go over these now, then the benchmarks and issues, and see if Apple can keep me as a customer, or if I'm switching off of this device. The 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro with 10-core CPU and 32-core GPU. Then the new Snapdragon laptops that share the same GPU and neural processing engine, including two Surface Pro 11s with very different specs. We also have the Surface Laptop 7 with mid-tier Elite chip, but base level memory capacity. And finally the Asus VivoBook S15 with the lowest tier Elite chip, but 32GB of RAM. We actually have a great range of devices here to compare and see how the specs impact performance. And as it turns out, it really depends on what you're doing. Because looking at the numbers, I am incredibly impressed by the CPU performance of these Snapdragon chips. In native tests, nearly all of the new Windows devices, the Windows Snapdragon devices, they surpass most Apple chips, Intel's latest Lunar Lake, and even a Ryzen 5800X. That's a 16-thread desktop part, which is incredibly impressive. But these chips are like most modern processors, and the specs alone, they really don't tell you the full story. Take the VivoBook, for example. On paper, it has the second worst Snapdragon chip, yet it outperformed the others in multi-core tasks simply because it could keep the processor cooler for longer. So especially if your work involves heavily multi-threaded workloads, the device you choose can make a significantly bigger difference than the processor model inside of it. And that goes for the GPU too. The cooler and the technically weaker chips in terms of CPU performance often outperformed their technically more powerful CPU performant counterparts in graphics tasks, which is the area these Snapdragon chips do fall much further behind. But to break everything down, you're getting CPU performance, which is fantastic, a GPU I wish was more powerful, but a grab-and-go battery experience I just haven't seen before on Windows. Which actually leaves Apple in a pretty vulnerable situation, especially when we talk more practically about these devices. The reason why so many people moved over to Mac, including myself, is because they wanted something fast, something portable, and with great battery life for common tasks. All of these things are things that Apple does really well, but Apple's minimal self-drain in sleep mode is one of the biggest benefits for me. You then add a top-tier webcam, trackpad, keyboard, speakers, display. All of the things that Apple does well that have a big impact on usability. But none of those things are unique to Apple anymore. And Microsoft's biggest advantages over Apple cannot be ignored, even if they come with their own unique challenges. And in many key ways, Apple laptops don't even rank second. But first, we need to address the dragon-sized elephant in the room. Given that these Windows on ARM devices have serious CPU power, they're portable, and they fix battery drain issues that plague most other Windows laptops, why haven't they taken over the market? Well, because the majority of Windows applications are developed for, well, not this architecture. And the real-world impact of that ranges from not an issue to a complete deal breaker for some people. As it currently stands, you'll find many more situations on these Snapdragon Windows devices where an app you need doesn't have a native ARM release, and most of the time this isn't an issue. Stuff like web browsers, Microsoft Office, many professional applications, they have native ARM support, and the list is growing. But if you need an application that is maybe older or less popular, it may never get ARM native support and will fall back to emulation at the expense of battery life and performance. The saving grace here is that there is so much raw performance in these chips that unless it's a really demanding application, you may not even notice it. The most surprising and best example that I've come across so far is emulating Premiere Pro, an application known for bugginess and chewing through powerful machines. So to see if these devices can truly handle a professional workflow, even when emulating, I decided to edit this video on the non-native version of Premiere Pro, testing emulation in one of the most demanding ways, and it's been pretty great. I can honestly say that I have never used a Windows device this thin and this light with this much battery that can also skip around a 4 and 6K timeline this effortlessly. Or at least I would say that, but there's now a native ARM release for Premiere Pro, which definitely improved performance even more. So we've gone from surprisingly great to actually impressive. And that's what building native ARM applications can do. But that mission is inherently going to be more challenging on Windows compared to Mac. And that's for two reasons. One, the sheer quantity of apps on Windows is just so much larger compared to Mac. And two, x86 is still being supported. So Microsoft aren't taking the same update or be left behind approach, which doesn't incentivize developers in the same way onto the new platform. So at least for now. If there's a software or a device with a complex driver that you really can't live without, make sure that you do check the compatibility. But these are the issues that I've found so far for how I use the device. And luckily, none of them are a deal breaker for me. But if that is a no-go for you, I recommend looking into Lunar Lake laptops. They won't have the same raw horsepower and battery life benefits, but they will have the best compatibility. But if this is less of an issue for you, one of these may actually be a better companion. Which is where we come back to my experience of using a Mac. As someone whose first two computers were IBM-based Apple desktops, and I've had 3 Macs since then, there's several crucial things that Apple does extremely poorly. They either straight up don't work, or the workaround is just unreasonable. Take file management, for example. I obviously don't want to get info on each of these separately and then use the calculator app to figure out what the total is. That is amazingly stupid. And when I go to copy a file, what is the speed? How do I know if there's a bottleneck? Because knowing that could save me a lot of lost time, like trying to get back to a specific window in an application. Applications can have multiple windows, and none of the information that you have provided me helps. How do I get back to what I'm trying to do? It is wasting my time. But you can fix all of that with third-party apps, which is true. But then you get into the fact that there are less ongoing costs with Windows compared to Apple, because many of the paid-for applications on Mac have free versions on Windows. I could probably list another 10 things here that are awful on Mac very easily, but I've probably already annoyed enough fanboys with those. And even though Windows is far from perfect, it does a significantly better job of being flexible and fundamentally doing what an operating system should do, facilitating the task you are trying to complete, and otherwise just getting the hell out of your way. Oh yeah, it's just completely forgotten my servers apparently. And I was willing to overlook all of these issues for years, the frustrating things, because when I needed my machine, I knew this Mac would see me through to the end of the day, and I wouldn't open it up for it just to be drained of battery. And that battery drain in its sleep, honestly, is arguably one of the most important things for me in a portable device, but that's now true for Windows Snapdragon laptops. So given that I'm struggling to find reasons why macOS is better, plus you can choose from a list of Windows devices to better optimize for features you care most about. And that device is likely going to be significantly cheaper than a comparable Mac. I think it's time to say goodbye to Apple, to pick a new laptop. I don't want to lose what I think Apple does well, and they have been the industry leader in stuff like speakers and keyboards. So the device that I pick, one of these guys, has to at least come close. And here are the prices for each of them, which I will also take into consideration. It is my own money, after all, and I'll drop links to all of them below if you want to pick one up. But the first to be eliminated is the VivoBook. It does have a fantastic color-accurate display, and even against Apple laptops, and the best multi-core performance at a very compelling price, especially for the specs. It also has the biggest battery and the best port selection out of every Windows device here. But where it lacks is the down-firing speakers, no touchscreen, and the keyboard and trackpad, they're just so subpar compared to everything else on the table. But if you're on a budget and you prioritize performance, battery, and display, this should absolutely be a top contender. Sorry, Vivian, that's what I call her. You're just not the laptop for me. Next to go is the Surface Laptop 7. It really is a great device in an all-round phenomenal package, but the speakers are again down-firing. Like if you wanted to watch a video on a soft surface, this is what you're going to hear. It's not good, is it? The keyboard is good, but it's really not Apple level, and otherwise I don't really have any complaints, which is probably a compliment given how critical I am. It's also technically my wife's machine, so I can't actually keep it. Thank you very much for letting me borrow that. So it looks like we only have a minimum and a maximum spec Surface Pro left, which both have great speakers. Oh my god, they are next level good for a device in this form factor. They honestly blew me away. And if you get the Surface Flex keyboard, a $400 keyboard, that's way too expensive, But honestly, it is the best typing experience I've had from any portable device. And being a tablet, it's in a form factor that I find fundamentally just more versatile, being able to do more and get more done in more situations, like editing part of this video on a flight extremely comfortably, which is something I've been trying to do for years. And I'll definitely be getting a tablet stand for my bed and by the sofa, being able to just do more with this device, regardless of which Surface Pro I settle on. So given that you can upgrade the storage for every Windows device that we've covered today, that really hasn't been part of my consideration. But the sub $1,000 Surface Pro has an IPS screen instead of OLED, which I see as a benefit in many ways. However, it does have a slightly weaker chip and less memory, which really isn't worth the price doubling, but if you play your cards right, it may not have to be. So I am sticking with the 32GB OLED, because if you hunt around, you might also manage to get one for $1,500, like I did. And Microsoft's warranty is tied to the device, not the purchaser. So there's no worries going used here. And at that price, it is 100% worth the upgrade for me. But if you didn't have the need for more memory and extra cores, video editing, I would absolutely settle on the cheaper one, the cheapest Snapdragon device, with specs and a price that makes a lot of sense when you only need to spend $80 for a 1TB upgrade. So let me know if you're a Mac laptop user that has or might switch. What made you or is holding you back? Because even if not one of these, Lunar Lake is a good alternative, especially for gamers. And you can learn more about how Nvidia helped Intel fix their biggest mistake in GPU history by watching this video. Otherwise guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.